What is the creepiest thing you've heard a child say? 1. True story, this creeped me the freak out. I worked as one of those people who will try to sell you crap you don't need, except it was food. So my job had me a different food item every work day that I would try to convince people they needed to buy. This particular day, it was cream cheese. So, what is the easiest thing to do with cream cheese and bagels? So I'm doing cream cheese and bagels and I have customers coming up to me, different flavors of cream cheese yada yada. Then I see a regular and her kid. Now I've experienced this regular and her 5-year-old several times, and the kid seems kind of off. Maybe a bit slow? Maybe? No. TLDR, that child is a freaking psychopath anyway, so I'm asking him what flavor he wants. He tells me, and he says, I want to watch you put it on the bagel. Are you going to use a knife? Hairs on the back of my neck stand up and I'm like, oh, okay. So I start to put it on there and he says, go slower. I want to see what it looks like when you go slower. Oh my God. You're 5. Take your bagel and cream cheese. Just thinking about that day makes me shiver. That child is going to grow up to be something evil. 2. When I started dating my wife, her 4-year-old niece looked me dead in the eye and said, if you make her cry we'll take you out into the woods and leave you there. 3. We asked my 5-year-old cousin who she was talking to in the den. She said with excitement, I was showing Pap my dolls. He had passed that morning but we hadn't told her yet. 4. My high school girlfriend has a little brother who was like 3 to 4 at the time. One day we were babysitting him and playing with cars on the floor. Out of nowhere, he starts looking really concerned and looking around. We keep playing, but he stands up and walks straight into the garage. We followed him in there and he just kept looking toward the wall and started crying. My girlfriend kept asking him what was wrong, and he through all of his weeping he gets out, he says I am his. Still freaks me out just thinking about it. 5. My son, at the age of 5, talking about Minecraft, I killed the creeper and then burned down his house. Oh, I should have burned down his house with him inside it, doing both things at once. Yeah, I don't even know where you've been playing Minecraft, but you need to take a break from it for a while. Figuring out how to best kill someone and destroy their property is not a skill you need quite yet. 6. Every time I took my toddler out for a walk he would look up at the sky and say, fire, and extend his arms up motioning to the whole sky. He did this every single time he stepped outside and would repeat it throughout the walk. Turned out that he would watch this cartoon that teaches him about the solar system and it always showed the sun as a big ball of fire. 7. I used to teach swimming lessons for preschoolers, and we had this one kid named Cass who was the cutest little guy ever, also one of the only ones brave enough to let us take him out in the deep end with a life jacket on. Well, one day I was swimming slowly with him holding on to my shoulders and I could hear him talking to himself, I wonder what he'd smell of if I burned him up. I think the little guy was talking about me. 8. Little girl by herself at the pool and starts diving and swimming near our group. She looks over at us and says, I live in your nightmares, then dove into the pool and we didn't see her again. 9. One summer my Korean neighbors were having a little cousin of theirs visit from Japan. She is Korean and just lives there, her name was Una, Oona. There are 4 of my Korean neighbors. There is a girl 1 year younger than me, a girl who was about 9 at the time, a boy who was 7, and a 4-year-old. God bless their mother. Now the kids' first language was Korean, the 2 older girls spoke perfect English, and the older boy spoke English, but broken and his sentence structure was very bad. The littlest one spoke a little bit, but only enough to communicate what he wanted. Una, the visiting cousin, spoke absolutely no English at all. Una was about 7. Una was a huge witch for being only 7. You may think I'm being harsh, but I am not. Una was an only child who was spoiled to no end. She demanded things to be her way and hit all the kids when they didn't give her their ice cream, even the girl who was my age at the time, about 14 to 15. But she did this all in Korean. I had no idea what she did, I could only infer by her actions what she yelled at them. The older girl said she spewed complete filth and nasty comments at them. Even the 4-year-old. She was visiting the entire summer and we were only 2 weeks in and she was making everyone's life hell. The mom did nothing about it, at all, leaving the little ones helpless. I tried to help with the little bit of Korean I had picked up from being at their house so often for years. Mostly just how to yell and tell kids to stop fighting. I babysat a lot. But there was nothing I could do. Una was a vicious tyrant spitting out Korean and Japanese swears. She lived in Japan but was Korean. And you would think the answer to this question would come from a translation of her filth. Oh, but no, it was a result of her tyranny. At one point, the older boy, her age, was tired of her, taking his toys, ice cream, and money, and hitting him. He had had enough. Remember, he spoke English but it was very broken. But that day, 2 weeks into the summer, realizing he had about 2 more months left living with Adolf Una, he said one of the weirdest things a child could have picked up at his age with such broken English. The only way to get away from Una is to kill me. He proceeds to lock himself in the bathroom. He also screamed from inside the bathroom, if I never see Una again it'll be too soon, in perfect, flawless, English. Where did he hear these things? I have no idea. But it was goddamn creepy and terrifying to hear from a 7-year-old who has just locked himself in the bathroom to a 15-year-old girl babysitting 4 kids. The older sister was out with friends. But God, I hated that girl too. If I ever see Una again, it'll be too soon. 10. I was working at a kid summer camp and had to go with this 6-year-old boy to the bathroom. While he was washing his hands he looked at me while smiling and said, "Is your dad died?" I looked at him and said, "No. He's not." Then the kid said, "Well, why isn't he?" Wasn't sure how to respond to that. 11. My wife's niece had an imaginary friend when she was 2 to 3 years old. Not unusual on the surface, but her imaginary friend had the same name as her grandfather who had died 15 years prior, and she seemed to know stories from her dad and aunts, my wife's, life when they were kids. The biggest thing was her friend had died after being shot, which was how her grandfather died. So I was talking to this little girl about her friend and she said, "Yeah, name, says he can come down from the clouds whenever he wants, he just has to sneak out." 12. A friend of a friend brought their 3-year-old grandson to our house. The kid picked up a small metal shovel and said to another 3-year-old little girl that was there with her dad, "I'm going to break your freaking head in with this shovel." As soon as he realized we had heard and seen what was going on he put the shovel down to pretend that nothing happened. We alerted both adult parties but unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any real consequences for this kid. 13. 4 to 5 years old came up to me and was pointing towards the arcade room, "Come play with me." I said, "I'm busy, I'm sorry." "Go ask, insert girl's name." The little girl was like, "If you don't come to play with me I'll choke myself." Then just stared at me. Then eventually left. 14. I work in the ER. Once a little girl came in. Her mom found her in her room, scraping a pencil up and down her shin bone. When her mother asked what she was doing, she said, "I'm just doing my math homework." She would not look at her siblings and kept saying she didn't have any. She kept eerily staring at her parents, repeating, "You're not supposed to be here," in an all-knowing, matter-of-fact voice. They brought her to the ER, and they brought along a few sticky notes and a drawing that she'd done that night. They looked exactly like something from a horror movie. One had "Death" written in large letters in the middle of the sticky note, and smaller crowded together repeating "Death" covering the rest of the note. One said, "I know your sisters and I will defeat them without any fear." One said, "Prepare for battle on the trampoline. It begins at sunset." It was disturbing. 15. I was on the bus and this little girl and her mom get on. She takes one look at me and bursts into inconsolable tears. Her mom is doing everything she can to make her stop, but all to no avail. Eventually, the mom just says freak it and takes the kid off the bus, but the kid starts wailing more, and says, "Mama, don't go, that girl is gonna die soon." I was a little sketched out for the rest of the day. 16. This happened about 3 years ago. I went on a vacation with my parents to go see some family in Calgary, Alberta. They were pretty young parents and had 2 kids, one 6 and the other 3. Both were born with pretty bad speech impediments and the 6-year-old barely talked, while the 3-year-old couldn't. Since they were at a good age for it, we decided to take the kids to Drumheller. Basically, the whole town was dedicated to dinosaurs. One of the last stops of the day was to an old mine that had some houses that miners supposedly lived in. My parents and the 3-year-old kid went into one building while I took the 6-year-old with me. About halfway through the house he pointed at a closet and said, "Boy killed girl here." He was pretty young, so I asked him what he meant. It was a big mistake. He elaborated, "Boy killed a girl in the neck with a knife and put her in a closet. The boy left after." Needless to say, I crapped my pants and got the hell out of Dodge. After we stopped in the gift shop, however, I asked the cashier if there has ever been a haunting here and she told me that exact story. Sorry for any errors, I'm on mobile and it was a while ago. 17. Okay, so I used to volunteer at a really old nursing home for really old people. It was all Japanese, so most of them had witnessed World War II. The oldest lady there was 105 at the time. So I'm helping the other volunteers bring out food in the dining room, and another helper was this woman and her little daughter, maybe 8 or 9. The kid came up to me with a plate of food above her head, 'cause she was short and was trying to give it to me, who was taller. And she hands me this plate of rice and starts to turn around, but pauses to look at me, and asks, "How many times do you give poisons foods to people before they go die?" I don't think she understood that the elderly people there died from their old age. And she probably thought they died because we gave them poisonous food. 18. I work at a preschool. Over the years I have heard the kids say some creepy funny things. One little boy who was 5 always had strange things to say. One afternoon I was leaving to go home and on my way out I said goodbye to him and he stared at me and then responded with, "Why are you saying goodbye? Are you going to die?" This is also the same little boy who would try and grab teachers' asses. 19. This happened to me at work last week. So my co-worker and I were looking at some kids when they walked away and one yelled, "Come on. We need to have the funerals." There was one girl left behind and when we looked at her and said what she said, I don't know, something about having funerals for their babies that died in their stomachs. They're weird. My co-worker and I stared at each other and they said, "Well, that's disturbing." The girls were around 8 years old maybe. 20. I babysat a kid once that told me he wanted to put his dad in one of those bags that suck the air out of it and run the dad over with a 4-wheeler. 21. I was visiting my brother and his family. We were on our way home from dinner and my nephew is in the back seat, we thought sleeping. Out of nowhere he points into the sky and says, "Soon," in the creepiest voice ever. He's only 3 at the time. I have no clue what he was doing. He's such a goofy kid though, that when he noticed it got our attention, he repeated it often. It became the saying of the entire trip. 22. I don't know if creepy is the best description for how I felt when this happened, but here goes. My daughter was about 2 years old and sleeping with us in our bed one night. I was having a lucid, vivid, whatever you want to call it, dream about walking through an apple orchard. Totally not creepy and not anything to startle me or wake me out of sleep, but I do wake up. It's probably 3 a.m. It's completely pitch black and I just lift my head an inch off the pillow to hear this cute little 2-year-old voice say, "Tell me about the apple daddy."